Welcome to It's All Connected. I'm Mitch Miller, Director of Economic Development for York County, South Carolina. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest innovation announcements in the Carolinas this year, the National Science Foundation Grid Modernization Engine in the Carolinas. We'll talk about what it is, why it matters, and what it means for business. Joining me today are Dr. John Daniels and Catherine Hayes. And before we really get in and talk about the engine, we're going to throw it over to John and explain briefly your role and how you became involved.
Thanks for having us. I'm really excited to talk about this and what it means for the Carolinas. So, as you said, my name's John Daniels, and I have two roles. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research at UNC Charlotte. And more important to our topic today, I'm the Interim Chief Executive Officer for the NSF Grid Modernization Engine in the Carolinas. And really, this all got started by a recognition of the importance of how universities, working with the federal government and governments at all levels, as well as industry, entrepreneurs, and then trying to attract venture capital, how we can transform regions through profound and accelerated economic development. And so to do that, you have to look at your assets. And for us, it was focusing on power, focusing on energy. And the grid, of course, is what connects all of that.
That's great. Catherine, how about you? Tell us about your role and how you're involved.
Yeah, thank you so much. Much appreciate the opportunity. It's been a great partnership with John and his team at UNC Charlotte. And SCRA was invited to participate from University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Catherine Hayes, I'm the Director of Industry Solutions for South Carolina Research Authority. And on the engine, I serve as the Director of Cross-Sector Partnerships and Stakeholder Engagement. This has been a journey. We've been on this for over 3 years and really working together to leverage the assets we have in the region, including manufacturing and our smaller tech firms, our startups. SCRA already has a strong foundation in working with technology-based startups, with industry and with academic innovation. So when I first saw this model from NSF as the Regional Innovation Engine to develop for the region, I was like, this is what SCRA does every day, sure, but this is on a much bigger scale and a much better opportunity for both states to collaborate on the grid modernization piece.
That's great. I'm really excited to hear more about it today and talk with you both. So thank you for joining and being part of this. John, I'm going to start with you some questions, especially for folks who may not understand what the NSF engine is. Can you talk a little bit about what it is, maybe in simple terms, and how it's different from like a conventional university research grant or research center?
Mitch, this is such a great question, because when you think of a grant or research project, if that's where your mind is, this is not at all that. This is not a research grant. This is the federal government, the way they would describe this, the way the U.S. National Science Foundation would describe this, is as the largest effort at what we call place-based innovation since the Land Grant Act. So if you go back a couple hundred years, and we plopped a university in virtually every state in the union, and that was intended to foster innovation in every state. That was place-based innovation. That's where a lot of the land grant universities came to be. And so now, what does economic development look like in the 21st century? Well, it starts with, where do you have key ingredients? Where do you have core assets? Where do you have a right to win, not just nationally, but internationally? And so the National Science Foundation, with its mission not just to advance basic science, but to get that science into deployment, to have an actual impact on industry and economic development, has created this model to say, hey, look, how about regions compete? So that when you think about, what makes Silicon Valley, what makes Kendall Square in Boston, what gives it those attributes for economic development? And as you think towards the future, and you think about different topical areas, where are the next cities that are going to have, and the next regions that are going to have and be known for key areas? And so here we are in the U.S., the National Science Foundation, being a U.S. federal agency, would prefer that those locations not be Guangzhou or Shenzhen, China, or any other city there, or any other part of the world. They'd rather be in places like Charlotte or Rock Hill, or somewhere in the Carolinas, according to those assets. So this program had all parts of the country from coast to coast compete and have them look introspectively and say, where do you have the best assets and where do you think you're the absolute best in the U.S. to compete in a given area? And for us, it's modernizing the grid.
That's great.
I would add to that also to say, what problem are you solving that your region really needs a solution? And one of the things that we know is that there's a huge increase in power demand, in electrification, in expanding existing manufacturing and recruiting new companies here, and also, of course, from our hyperscalers, and population growth to the Carolinas. So this is another part of the problem we're solving. There's a real need. The other piece, I think, to emphasize what John already said is the difference in this from a traditional model from a university is that this is intended to be a market pull. So it's use-inspired research, pulling it from lab to market. And that really is part of this whole partnership concept and collaboration consortium, because we have a wide range of partners on it to inform us what technologies really are going to make a difference.
I think collaboration is a key word that you mentioned. Talk a little bit about that in more detail, and really, your role of how bringing this kind of coalition together actually happened, and who are some of those key partners.
So it's been a wonderful journey, and I'll be honest, a tough, sometimes difficult, takes a lot of time to align interests of a variety of groups. So economic development, academic institutions, startups, large industry players, our utilities, right? They don't normally work together in this kind of collaboration. But one of the things that's been so rewarding is that they see the vision, and we've been crafting that and honing that with their input. So really pulling together a 5-person startup with a 200,000-person OEM and our utilities is really been a cool journey. It isn't just that they had to write a letter of support. Yes, this is a great idea, we'll support it. They had to actually write a letter of collaboration. That was a requirement from NSF to identify what they will contribute to this engine, as well as what they expect to get out of it.
Yep.
And what we intend to do with that is synthesize that information, put like partners together, where they can have synergy to really pull this research and these new technologies into the market.
Yep.
So we can give you a few quick examples of that, but we have manufacturers that are interested in technologies that, say, Duke Energy has already vetted in their Mount Holly test bed, or at the EPIC test bed, or at Clemson's test bed. So we can do that matchmaking where they might not know about that, especially new innovation coming from this area.
And I might just add, in addition to all that, you ask about the collaboration and how the team came together, and why UNC Charlotte and the South Carolina Research Authority and Clemson, these other partners. Part of that was a thoughtful, data-driven approach, county by county. And as I said, and as we've said earlier, this part of the country is the highest concentration of assets. So you superimpose, where are the assets, where are the organizations, and then where's the manufacturing potential? Where are the opportunity indices, county by county, for growth and for workforce development? And if you do the math, and you look at the data, you discover that our region of service is really ideal and optimized for economic growth, because it synthesizes everything that Catherine said with the partners. It highlights the organizations that should be working together, because it makes sense, because they fit perfectly like puzzle pieces in terms of the work they already do, the assets they already have, and if only they coordinated on a central vision, like modernizing the grid, we can get so much more done so much more quickly.
John, go ahead. Sorry,
No, it's
guys.
okay. I just you and I talked briefly about this already, where we have, North Carolina and South Carolina Department of Commerce and our South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce working together to define that region of service, really looking at our various counties from Tier 1 down to Tier 4 and saying, okay, what does this region, what are the assets, but what also do they need?
Yep. So John, I ask you this. Y'all both have touched on it. Why are North and South Carolina the right region to lead this work? Really, here in the Carolinas, where Charlotte is a major city, but those two states come together. Why do you feel like this is the region to really lead, the modernization work for the grid that you guys are going to embark in and take on?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. If you think about the country as a whole, where's the growth happening? Where are people moving?
Very true.
Clearly, that's the Southeast. That naturally induces a need and a demand on the grid. Likewise, the manufacturing that's already here and that will continue to grow. How do we support that? And then obviously, nationally and internationally, there's a need to meet the moment for AI and what that looks like in demand. So all of those factors are far more acute here. If we get it right here, we get it right for the whole country. That's A. B, if you look at the partners that are here, the investments that they have made specifically in this area, you're not going to find a higher concentration. So if you look at the support that UNC Charlotte has invested in its energy production and infrastructure center, or if you look at Clemson University and their facilities down in Charleston or even in Clemson, South Carolina, you look at the South Carolina Research Authority and all the investments that they have made, as well as York Tech and its leadership with community colleges, not just York Tech as an institution itself, but the connectivity that President Stacey Moore has with community colleges in both North and South Carolina. When you add it all up, not only is the problem fairly acute, if not mostly acute here, we also so happen to have the best assets. I'll say a third part to that is, Catherine pointed out that this is, and your first question was, well, gosh, is this like a research project? This is economic development and it's market driven. So let's talk about the industry in this region. So who's providing the power? So whether it's Dominion or Santee Cooper or Duke Energy, and then other large organizations with a vested interest in all of this, Honeywell, Nucor, all of these organizations have a vested interest and are supportive of this effort. EPRI, for example, EPRI is, that name used to stand for the Electric Power Research Institute. They work with utilities nationwide and internationally. They're in our region of service. So, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's utilities, all of that is right here in the highest and most optimized concentration to solve a problem that's national.
That's great. It's exciting.
It is.
You mentioned some partners, but both of you mentioned some partners. Can we talk a little bit about the technology that you think this engine will actually develop, test, deploy, and really the partner's role in that? And if you can give me a couple concrete examples, I think that might be helpful for some of the listeners.
Yeah, well, let me take a stab at that. I'm going to ask Catherine to fill in the gaps that I
Sure.
create. So if you think about this is an investment over 10 years. And, to back up and point out what's the big picture here. So we have been competing for the past 2.5 years against other regions in the entire U.S. And we've been awarded up to $160 million over 10 years, right? Now, that's meant to be a catalytic investment. And so we know, based on some of the partners we've already talked about and the investment opportunities in this region, that will have a multi-billion-dollar impact on this region with additional investment. So what does that look like in terms of technologies that we're creating? So if you think about that 10-year arc, what we're doing on day one is ensuring that we have a clear line of sight, an unobstructed pipeline by which technologies can get to the marketplace. Because, Mitch, one of the challenges in this space is that there are already fantastic startup companies and larger corporations and technologies that are out there, and they may be technically viable, but there are other adoption barriers out there. And so step one in the engine is to ensure that we're able to identify and surface these technologies and position them for the investment that they may need to go through the multiple valleys of death, meaning not just technical viability, making sure that it can be commercialized, and then making sure it can make a profit. And so if you can clear out some of those barriers, it makes it more attractive for follow-on investment. So as far as some, to be a little bit more specific, you said, well, John, give me some concrete examples. Well, think about grid enhancing technologies. We're talking about the grid, and that's all about getting power, for example, from a source of generation whether it's nuclear or gas or whatever it is, getting that across transmission lines and then through distribution lines and then to homes and businesses. That's a lot of wires, right?
Sure.
And there's transformers and converters and inverters along the way. Some of the near-term basket of technologies deal with what we call grid-enhancing technologies. So you think about a wire and how do you make it more conductive for electricity to flow through with the existing infrastructure without ripping it out and putting a new one in.
Sure.
There's a whole pile of technologies in that space, and what they need is they have to be connected with what about the 100 different standards and types of certification they have to comply with before going from, oh yeah, that works in a lab, but how does it work in the actual grid? Where and when will you have confidence that it's going to work in the grid? And so that's sort of our focus. We can talk a little bit more about specific technologies. I'll just say one. We have one that the abbreviation is GAUPS, GALPS, and it's a grid ancillary uninterrupted power supply. So Catherine will talk a lot about on the manufacturing side. Whenever you have a surge in power or God forbid, a blackout, this can be very problematic for our manufacturers.
Yep.
Ramping up, it's not, it's one thing to flip on a switch for the light in this room. It's another for sensitive equipment. And so we have researchers at UNC Charlotte who have developed a technology that essentially builds upon uninterruptible power supplies, but also ensures the quality of that power when you ramp it back up isn't going to ruin the equipment. And that can be vital in hospital settings, could be certain sensitive manufacturing facilities. And so that's an example of something at the grid industry interface. But there's more, and Catherine, you probably can add to that.
Yeah, one thing I want to add to this is that of course, we're working with our utilities and with Siemens and Honeywell Nuclear, Milliken, interested in the advanced materials piece of this. One of the things that they will do, and they already do on their own, is pilot new technologies. But what they don't do is get them from demonstrating the capability technically to market.
Yep.
And they aren't going to invest that kind of money in a company unless they are actually thinking of acquiring them or investing in them for return. So that's something that South Carolina Research Authority already does and already helps with these startups, looking really more at their business plan and their penetration in the market and their capital efficiency. One of the things that we know about these technologies that John's describing is that it can take years.
Yep.
The standards, the different stage gates they have to go through, the milestones they have to meet before a utility or a manufacturer is comfortable to make it integrated part of their main process and their main system. So we are going to help, and we already do this, but this is going to be scaled. We're going to help bridge that gap and get them over some of those hurdles. And to be honest, there might be some that you say, this is an awesome technology. It doesn't have a good future in terms of getting to market. Sure. And knowing that sooner can save a lot of money and a lot of time for a founder as well. Sure. So we have the privilege of talking to several founders that have already demonstrated their technology with Duke or Dominion or Santee Cooper or other utilities. And their expression is, we've spent a lot of money and we've had 7-8 product iterations. If we had known earlier what we know now, well, of course, anyone can say that, but to John's point, they don't have to meet all 220 standards. There's this 20 that matter for their product.
Yep.
So our engine will help look at that and, utilizing AI to help us evaluate that with our experts to really accelerate the technology deployment.
I really appreciate that explanation. You teed it up so nicely for my next question
Good.
that I had for you both. I think new technology in general, but really as we look at grid technology, why does it take so long to deploy new grid technology, and how do you see this engine really kind of shortening that time frame?
So I'll take a first crack at that. This is a challenging innovation sector to work within. Software, no problem. When you're talking about the grid, let's begin with recognition that reliability is number one. And it has to function all the time, and there's not an incentive to color outside the lines and to innovate real time when people's lives are at stake with regard to ensuring that power is there and uninterrupted. So, the industry is rightfully concerned about ensuring that you have that. That's number one. And, so how do you adjust that? How can we influence that? Well, part of that is by making sure that we have trusted relationships. And this, I'm going to try to link together your question now about, well, gosh, what about innovation in this space, in the grid space, and what makes that so challenging? It's totally related, inextricable with the partnership and the collaboration. Because of this region, because of the longstanding relationships we have with the corporate partnerships and the academic institutions and South Carolina Research Authority, because of those longstanding relationships, we have the trust and the relationships that we can, when working together through this engine, more quickly identify some of the challenges that Catherine has identified, so that you are reducing the risk of trying a different technology. And let's also be honest, as we gather here now, our ability to do a vast array of virtualized testing and with very physical test beds that are isolated from the grid itself, we have facilities that can test these things without any additional risk to the grid itself. And so you test these things either in a virtual environment or a digital environment or a computational environment, or we have facilities where you can physically test actual components and see what that looks like. I'll give you one other example. Let's just take take a basic component of the grid, and that's transformers. Stepping up voltage or reducing it as you move electricity from point A to point B. Those transformers, the average age of a large power transformer is something like 40 plus years. And it takes, if you want to order one, Mitch says, hey, I'd like a large power transformer, places an order. Yeah, sure, no problem. 3 years later, it shows up. Like, we can't wait that long. What can we do? Well, what are other ways we can manufacture that? Where can we manufacture that? And with what material can we manufacture that? So there are some real ways in which we can say, you know what, instead of relying on that source of power transformers at some other foreign location, what about manufacturing it here in South Carolina or North Carolina? And what about using a different material and manufacturing it differently? So it's not a 3-year wait, it's a 3-month wait. And by the way, it's being manufactured right here with hands that are trained from the community college system right here.
That's great. I feel like I owe it to ask you this question because essentially your title of cross-sector partnerships, talk about what that means and maybe how you make those connections a little easier for this engine.
Absolutely. So we have already, as I mentioned, developed these relationships across 120 partners. And it's time consuming and also extremely interesting to see how much momentum and excitement we have about making this happen. So from a manufacturing standpoint, of course, they're interested in energy efficiency in their own facilities, but also in reliable, uninterrupted, affordable power, right, to run their operations and to be able to expand their operations. So they're willing to participate and provide resources. So I won't speak specifically companies, but we have companies that said, okay, we have a prototyping lab. We will absolutely help you with certain technologies utilizing our capabilities to prototype these. We have testing facilities. Okay, we will help test these, as John said, either virtually or physically. We have others that say, economic development. Okay, we can be an innovation hub for you where we pull together partners in the community, startups, interested students, and try new technologies. We're working on digital twins where you could have an immersive environment and learn more about what are required in a field, as well as potentially, absolutely doing the technology piece of it. So I think we've done a good job in communicating a vision. And of course, now it's time to execute that and pull these partners together. The tactical piece of that, we'll have an intake form on each of our websites where we'll be able to synthesize that information, what your interests are, in terms of technology, your technology readiness level, in terms of would you already have customers, those kinds of questions, to be able to say, okay, we understand what bucket these groups have to go in. These are some others maybe more visionary. These are more tactical. Of course, in your role for economic development, we're already talking to companies internationally and nationally, trying to get them to come here, use our assets, and then, of course, encourage them to move here, entrench them here.
Yep.
And that's part of my job and all of us, really, to make those connections where they see opportunities. One of the kind of taglines we've been saying is, we have your customers here,
Yeah.
right? So making those connections is critical. But the cool thing is that our partners are interested. It's not, having to make cold calls. They're already excited about doing it.
Yeah. I think just expanding upon that a little bit, the SCRA's role in really kind of taking maybe promising technology and getting it from the testing point to actual adoption, commercialization of it. Talk about that just in a little more detail about how you really see your role being a pivotal part of kind of moving things faster.
So we already work with universities, and we also already work with our partner, Jules Accelerator. Of course, we already work with startups. So we have a interesting pipeline that we'll already pull from, and we're welcoming more companies to engage in that from a technology standpoint. We already do coaching and non-dilutive funding, so grant funding, and SCRA has made a commitment of a significant amount of funds to put into this in terms of pulling the technology through. So for those of you that may not know about SCRA, we work with industry, academic institutions, and founders, startups. We also have an affiliate, SC Launch Inc., who can make equity investments. And those folks, we all do, but those folks in particular work with investors to draw them to the region and work with us, with these companies, to get follow-on funding. It's great. We're early stage. We're considered seed funding, but you have to have the whole process. You have to have Series A, Series B to make it to market. And it's part of our job to recruit those folks to the area. So we already have investor days planned. We have tech demos days planned, these innovation hubs I've mentioned in different communities to really pull all the partners together.
I think that's really exciting, and just to see kind of all of that kind of coming together. Anxious to see the results from all of that. John, I'm going to go back to the grant and the value. I think you've mentioned $160 million. How much has come in to date, and what do you see it really taking to get that full potential of that $160 million right here in this region?
Yeah, so great question, Mitch, and we're seeking all of it, and we're working from day one. So the way the award is structured, and this is for all the engines, is the award starts August 1st, and the way that works is they meter it out in what you might call tranches. So $15 million for the first 2 years. Okay, so $7.5 million for year one, $7.5 million for year two, and then with success, with those first 2 years, standing up the organization, attracting more interest, making some initial investments, some of which Catherine just alluded to with SCRA's investment, investing from funds from the engine itself in promising technologies and startup companies, demonstrating that value. Then we'll be eligible to move through the next hurdle, which is years 3, 4, and 5. And years 3, 4, and 5 would be funded at $15 million a year. And then again, you demonstrate success, you have another gate, and then it's $20 million a year. And each one of these investments, whether it's the $7.5 million for year one, whether it's the $15 million a year in years 3, 4, and 5, or the $20 million a year in years 6 through 10, all of that is intended to be catalytic. And so the intent of that is to make smart investments where we're also attracting other investment. And remember, there's 3 big pillars to this work, right? One is R&D. We have to have new technologies in the pipeline that we're developing. And of course, we have to get existing technologies moving, which is what we're focused on these first 2 years. And then there's the workforce development. And that workforce development is at all levels. It's certificates, it's vocational training, it's the work in our community colleges, it's the work in our universities, and it's all working together. And all that has to be crosswalked simultaneously. So when Catherine is meeting with existing or prospective manufacturers, she's having those conversations with absolute real-time knowledge of the evolving technology and the evolving workforce needs, and every other partner is aware of that as well. So as Dr. Stacy Moore at York Tech is rolling out training programs, not just at York Tech, but throughout North and South Carolina, the curricula is informed by the actual technologies that are coming out, the actual components. I gave the example earlier of a transformer. Like, what components would be manufactured here? What kind of skills are needed for that? And so all of this is moving together. And so, look, we want to show the indicators of the first 2 years that are essentially prorated of what we expect over 10 years. So over 10 years, we expect a multi-billion-dollar impact when you look at investment. We expect more than 20,000 jobs from this. We expect something like 445 different technologies to be accelerated and moved into deployment. And we can do that because we have the right partners and we have the right ingredients. And now, with this investment, we have the motivation and the incentive to work together to have that kind of impact.
I want to add just a quick anecdote about that. When we collect these letters of collaboration, several meetings to hone into what really will you contribute to this engine, what can you expect from this engine. And when we went back and we invited several of our partners to our National Science Foundation pitch, and that was, I think, a big part of our showing our regional collaboration was they came and they were really kind of evangelistic about this. And one of our partners, we had our CTO, present. And when I talked to him ahead of time, he said, "Wow, Catherine, that was a year ago. Our strategy has changed. What we're looking at developing and investing in is different." I said, "Absolutely." And everyone's will over 10 years. Yeah. It's not static. This is a dynamic engine. This is moving, and that is part of our role, is to keep them informed of where it's heading, what we're learning in our pilot projects and deployments, but also learning what they're investing in. These are, many of them are global companies, so they're watching trends in the market as well. And I think it's really fascinating that this will be over a long term. It's not just a 1 or 2 year project, right? You're really going to watch the market change, and we're going to respond to it.
Well, that's exciting. I think what I hear in that, these first 2 years, though, seem to be very important. You mentioned existing technologies. Talk about what do you see happening within these kind of first 12 to 24 months, and really what are people going to see the engine actually doing?
Yeah, so great question. And a reassuring framing of all this is that this has been as rigorous a competition as you can have, right? So our path to receiving this award has gone through 4 different evaluation cycles by independent evaluators who could care less about this region, could care less about the organizations, and care only about, is this a competitive region for this topic? And so they have concluded that it is. And by going through that gauntlet, by being trialed by that fire of interrogation and scrutiny of, where's the there? Are these partnerships real and true, and can you actually do something? And so given that we've made it to that hurdle, what is fantastic about the Engines program is that they've made it very clear that the competition between yourselves and whether it's other engines or other, that's over. Now it's time to collaborate. Now it's time to get it done. And so the NSF is bending over backwards to ensure the success of these engines. Obviously, we have to produce, and they're providing every resource imaginable. They have a whole set of resources to guide engines on day 1, day 2, month 1, month 2, in terms of how we're setting up our governance structure, how we're working with partners, how we are communicating, how we are effectively moving technology and the intellectual property that surrounds it, all of that stuff. We're not doing this alone. We're not on our own. We have all the capabilities, and we have the support to be successful. So that support for the National Science Foundation, their TIP directorate under Erwin Gyan-Chandani is amazing. So that support, coupled with the strength of our partnerships, the strength of all the large organizations and the small organizations that are working with us, I'm convinced that we can do that. So what does it look like? What will you see over the next few months and weeks? Well, you may recall when I introduced myself, I had the prefix Interim. So I'm the Interim Chief Executive Officer. And we're on the market for a full-time CEO to lead this engine. And he or she has to have an amazing skill set to achieve this transformative vision for the region. And again, this is a transformative region. I tell you, Mitch, you're going to come back and look at this moment and realize that this is a historic inflection point for economic development
I believe it.
for this region. And so, what's one of the next things you can look for? You can look for an announcement of our new CEO, and we plan to have that within a matter of months. We've already got a search underway. If you got some suggestions, I'll take them right now. And we're vetting those very carefully along with our partners. And we're solidifying some of the partnership agreements. We're solidifying. We have so there's some internal work that has to be done. But for those in your audience looking to say, well, what am I going to see? What's going to change differently? Well, very quickly you're going to see on the education front, you'll see a whole slew of educational opportunities. Again, under the leadership of Stacy Moore at York Tech, and fanned out throughout our region of service in both North and South Carolina, a variety of stackable credentials. Stackable, look, maybe Mitch doesn't have time to dedicate 4 years of his life to a new college degree, but maybe he's got 4 weeks for a certificate, and then, maybe that piques your interest, and that leads to, another credential that you put on top of that. That then enables you to get that job with Siemens Energy or Duke Energy or Dominion. So you're going to see more of that in a matter of months, not years. You're going to see already the fact that this region's been tapped. I mean, think about how the markets work. The markets react immediately when they see things moving in a direction. Just as sure as the three of us are on this set, there's a company somewhere else in the country, somewhere else in the world, and they're going to see what's being planted and the investment and the collective will to work together. They're going to want to be here. Why? Because they know that they're going to have like minds in this area of grid tech. They know that they're going to have a willingness and openness to have their technology vetted and supported. And so you're going to see announcements of additional investments everywhere from large manufacturers to startup companies who want to be in this area because they see the opportunity, see the vision, and see some of the seed funding that we're providing from an engine, that SCRA is providing. So I would expect to see, and this is going to happen now over a period of months. And then you're going to hear some announcements about, hey, look, this technology on this aspect of the grid has now been demonstrated viable. You'll see, just like I mentioned a little while ago, we had a news release for the technology invented by Sukumar Kamalasan, a UNC Charlotte professor. You're going to see more announcements like that. Some of those will come from universities like Charlotte, UNC Charlotte and Clemson. Some will be from other companies that are moving to this area. And you're going to see those announcements and you're going to say, wow, I didn't realize that we could do that. Wow, I didn't realize we could make a transformer in 4 months instead of 3 years. Those are the kind of things you will see, not in 10 years, but within months and over the next year-ish.
That's great. So I think about the importance of your role really as a connector of so many different groups and people. Talk to me a little bit about how maybe an established manufacturer, a startup, maybe an investor, economic development organization can get involved and really be supportive.
Well, appreciate that question. We absolutely welcome new partners. That's part of growing an ecosystem. So we have a great, base that we have to expand on. And, some are complementary interests. There might even be some competition. But what we have seen is that even with competition, they're interested in benchmarking with each other for the technology, but also for adoption capabilities. What are you implementing? How are you implementing? What's the return on investment? If it's not a competitive technology, they're willing to share that information. So we welcome folks to, certainly on each of our websites, we'll have a common intake form. That's our starting point. Then we will do a call, one-on-one interview basically, and really learn what their interests are, what their level of engagement is, and also the timing. Are you interested to engage today, or are you thinking about this over the next 2 years? Because that does make a difference, right? Do you want to meet companies that are already in this space? Do you want to meet a startup? Are you interested in piloting? So I have a kind of a tiered engagement level for let's say, for an industry partner, vet technology. I want to see what's out there, what the capabilities are today. Okay, I'm interested to pilot technology. I want to implement this. Or I'm interested to co-develop. We've had a few companies say, I'm probably not going to pilot this in our factories. We don't want to interrupt our existing manufacturing capability or production process, but I'm interested in co-development. So matchmaking those opportunities from both universities and smaller companies. We have companies that have said, we're interested to acquire. We've made 11 acquisitions in the last 3 years in this space. This is something we are interested to do. Those are great to hear, right? And then also just in terms of economic development in partnering. So I'm really excited that we've already hosted joint missions and joint collaborations between North and South Carolina hosting companies here. So that's really one of those we realize we're stronger together. And sure, there might be some healthy competition, but the bottom line is creating that interest internationally and nationally that this is a real hub. I'm going to find resources here. I'm going to find customers here. I'm going to find new opportunities here that I may not find in other parts of the world or other parts of the country.
Yep. Talk about new opportunities, and immediately my economic development brain kicks in. I think people recognize, obviously, Charlotte, some of the major utility players in this. But I think, what about the landscape across this entire region, the communities that you all are partnered with and representing? I want to talk a little bit about rural communities and maybe counties with, lower economic mobility and what that might mean for them for opportunities in the future, if you want to touch on that.
Sure. So we specifically looked at the landscape. And as John mentioned, I think I did too, this was a data-driven decision. And so our region of service is 36 counties, and 28 of them are in South Carolina. We go down I-77, down I-26, up I-26, and across I-85. So we have a good representation of South Carolina in this map, as well as around Charlotte and North Carolina. Part of that is it's data-driven from the population, from the assets, from our partners. It's also about rural and creating new opportunities for areas that have maybe not participated in this level of new innovation and opportunity before. So we have 5 counties specifically identified where we'll establish innovation hubs. And those are to bring together students, economic development, entrepreneurs, industry, existing industry, as well as potentially new industry that sees an opportunity here. As we mentioned, we will have both physical and digital interaction assets. We are definitely going to leverage our technical college system. So York Tech, we've mentioned, Midlands Tech, Trident Tech, Greenville Tech, to be able to host certain types of capabilities. York Tech has a really cool advanced manufacturing lab. But Stacy and I have already been brainstorming about how we'll make this also virtual, so that you can be in an immersive environment to see new technology, to see what it's like. Do I even want to go into this field? And that can be not just for a technical college student, but also industry partner. They already partner, and we, of course, make those connections of new industry partners that they want to send their existing workforce or even their existing R&D folks to see things and say, okay, this is something I might be interested to pivot to. If I mentioned this already, I'm going to reinforce it. Part of this engine is also looking at our existing assets, but where companies can expand operations or pivot to grid technologies. And we are going to, again, look at leveraging our test beds and our existing technical college system to explore those opportunities.
It's exciting to think about our existing base. Maybe that opens up the door for potential expansion and job creation. And that's truly exciting on my front. I think about projects and what they mean for a community, not just from a governmental standpoint, but from the citizens that call this place home and maybe the opportunities there. John, you said something important about, someone may not be able to commit 4 years to a university, but maybe 4 weeks for a certification. Can you kind of give me an idea of what career pathways you think are going to be created for people because of this grant?
Sure. Well, so look, there is such a demand for manufacturing components of the grid. It's taking too long with existing supply chains, and some of these supply chains are international. So there is a national security imperative as well as a economic need to get it right. And because South Carolina and North Carolina are so well positioned for manufacturing, there is such a need. We have manufacturers that are hungry for folks to realize that, number one, this is a career that's exciting, that's fulfilling, that has career advancement. And so one of the things that that we're excited to ensure that happens with somebody who has the 4 weeks as opposed to the 4 years can see themselves in a career in manufacturing and to realize what those opportunities look like and to realize that that may be the future that they want and they have a full opportunity space there, and it will open up other opportunities should they choose. All of us as we go through and we find what is the most sort of life-giving role for us that we work with. And so the idea is to lower the barrier as much as possible so that folks can, sort of like technology, you want to fail and fail fast. Well, likewise for a career, for a vocation. Is this for you? Let's find out, but let's make it easy to try that, and let's make it easy to pivot. So maybe you're doing work and you're learning skills that are required, whether it's construction, whether it's machining, whether it's advanced manufacturing, and that will lead to a whole set of opportunities within those spaces, and it may also lead to other opportunities with technology development. So, Mitch, you can lay out a seamless pathway with multiple points on and off the train from a certificate, series of certificates, job each way along, by the way, because there are opportunities that we're systematically, well, first off, they're available, and then we're cultivating more of those. And then associate's degree, baccalaureate degree, if that makes sense for that person, and obviously beyond, master's, PhD. The full spectrum of education is there, and the full set of needs are there. What is helpful is when you shine a line on that more intentionally and systematically and ensure that our employers who are moving here, so you're a Siemens Energy, and you've already invested $150 million in a transformer plant. Maybe you want to invest more, but you're concerned that you don't have enough people to show up at the plant.
Story of my life.
So we go into those innovation hubs. We go into these counties that you're concerned about, that we're concerned about, that we're judged on our efficacy of mobilizing and animating, and we ensure that folks are aware of those opportunities, and we make it easy for them to get in there. And then, by the way, we listen. We start with listening. We understand what are the current barriers. What's preventing you from having access to that, and we do everything we can to remove those barriers. Catherine, how would you pick up on that?
Yeah, and I would also say that I think we'll identify gaps. So it's not that we don't already have credentials and opportunities available from the technical college up. We do. It's an amazing system, and we have Apprenticeship Carolina that works very effectively. It's nationally recognized. But identify what the gaps are for grid and grid tech and advanced manufacturing. Again, I'm excited about the rural opportunities because I think we can bring technology to some of our rural communities where they can actually work there and not have to move elsewhere for a good paying job and a advancement through their career. That's part of my personal goal is to figure out how to make that a reality.
That's great. I think about the numbers, and again, this is economic development brain. When I hear, more than $2 billion potential in investment, 20,000 jobs created. Can you talk about what types of companies, maybe suppliers, what those new investments you kind of envision that looking like over the course of the life of the engine?
Yeah, so it's we have a long list of partners, and those are available on our website. And we've talked about some of them, and so I'll stop short of my estimating a given partner's investment plans. I'll defer to our partners to speak to that. If you think broadly about the types of partners that we have, you think about utilities, you think about large OEMs, you think about the manufacturers. And then, of course, there's the other side of the spectrum, new company formation. So you have technology, maybe it comes out of a university, maybe it came out of some other source or spun out of a company itself. Those companies can grow if you can get the customer discovery right, if you can get the adoption barriers removed. And those companies, as they produce product, will grow and hire more. So it's both a reinvigoration of well-established industries, and large corporate presence, which is already here, and large manufacturing that's already here, as well as ensuring that there's a whole new pipeline, a whole new set of markets that open up for the grid of the future. And so it's going to take, those jobs are going to take the form of individuals working on grid tech in a manufacturing facility. They're going to take the form of those who are entrepreneurs and working in startup companies and everything in between, because it takes all of it to address this need that's never been more acute. Catherine, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mentioned before noticing gaps in, say, the skills gap piece of that for industry. Like, where are there some gaps where we can capitalize and develop new programs for? That's also true for manufacturers. So one of the things we are designing right now is a manufacturing capability assessment to look at what we already have in the region, our core competencies. We have amazing advanced manufacturing. We have companies that can machine a bearing to 0.1 micron, right? It can be used to go to the space station. It can be used in aerospace, in automobiles, on the grid. So, but looking also there, where are the gaps? And that information gets fed to folks like you, where we can do targeted economic development. We have this part of the supply chain already here, companies introduced to manufacture this. We're missing this piece. And Mitch, please go find that. Invite them here. We will host them. We will introduce them to opportunities. And the same thing is true both on the manufacturing capability, but it's also true on the innovation side, on the new product side. One of the things I'm excited about is looking at economies of scale of, if we have one company looking to bring a new source to South Carolina or North Carolina versus 12 companies looking at that. Well, that's 12 new customers potentially as opposed to one. You might have more success recruiting them if you know where those customers are and who they are, right? And then we can facilitate those introductions.
I would just add a pinch too, in terms of, you mentioned you're putting your economic development hat on and thinking about some of the numbers that we put out there. If you think about the power demand, we've already pointed out that, never before have we had this constellation of drivers, the increase in power demand that's gone up like never before, and then the population growth and the manufacturing needs. And so if you think about the market for technologies, and depends how you frame it, grid, smart grid, energy generally, over the next 10 years, that's easily a worldwide $1 trillion market. There's other estimates that maybe it's $387 billion, depending on how you frame it, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, domestically, abroad. It's hundreds of billions of dollars. So supposing that, look, we've just clarified and confirmed and been validated as having the best part in the U.S. to focus on this technology, certainly we can get a couple billion out of hundreds of billions that are out there for the market. So the Carolinas are going to have a greater fraction of a very well-established market, the pie of which is only getting larger. It just takes the coordination of those conversations that you and Catherine just spoke about.
I am going to be selfish with a couple York County related questions, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
It's in the region of service. We love York County.
Exactly.
Talk about the I-77 corridor and specifically what you think this means for the I-77 corridor.
Well, I'll start by saying we already know that we have very successful companies that have located obviously within Charlotte, but also just across the border, right? There's leverage there both for workforce, assets, travel in and out of CLT, down I-77, I-26 right to the port, right? So Deep Harbor in and out as far as shipping, receiving is concerned. So I think we'll just continue to leverage this. We now have another resource, another anchor to recruit companies here. And I think, as I said, we've already had 7 meetings with different companies talking about this and what this could mean for them, primarily from Europe, but I'm sure we'll see it from other locations too.
That's great.
And that'll provide the resources to continue to invest and get ahead of needs for infrastructure. So if you think about the network, the infrastructure that's required, we can get this right so that in addition to recruiting these new companies and this new manufacturing, the investments are made in the roads and the bridges and the connectivity and all of that, the housing, everything that will accompany this in a way that's thoughtful, intentional, and smart.
That's great. York Tech is such an integral part to our recruitment efforts in York County and such a great partner. Can you talk a little bit about their role in all of this and really specifically what role they play?
Well, I can certainly endorse Dr. Stacy Moore. She's the president of York Technical College, and she's been fantastic. Really, from day one, stepped right into it, was already thinking about what the career pathway should be. As John already talked about, these stackable credentials. You already might be, well versed in your field. How do I add something new? I'm pleased to say Dr. Tim Hardy, the president of the South Carolina Technical Colleges System, has completely endorsed this, read a letter of collaboration. We have the support of the rest of the technical colleges when it makes sense to engage them in their labs. So York Tech is pivotal. And she's also hosted several of these meetings I'm talking about with new manufacturers. So she sees this as definitely integral to York Tech, but sees the total picture and working very closely. She's already met with all of the superintendents in all of our counties.
That's great.
It's impressive, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, York Tech is central to this. I mean, you think about this is an engine, not a research grant. And an engine is research, it's commercialization, and it's workforce. So we've already established that this is the best place in the entire U.S. to focus on grid modernization, and the best place to launch a whole effort on workforce development is at York Tech, and under Stacy Moore's guidance, linking the universities and the technical schools throughout the region of service. But York Tech is leading this engine's effort to do all of that workforce work. It's coordinated. It'll benefit folks in North and South Carolina. York Tech is leading that effort with its connectivity.
That's great. Just a couple more questions, and I think may be helpful to really think about next steps too. But what do you all see success looking like 2, 5, 10 years from now, and kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, so metrics of success, 2, 5, and 10 years. Our friends at NSF would be interested in that as well. And so you're going to see commensurate impact with these broad variables. So, at a high level, let's start with the vision. The vision is on the order of 20,000 jobs. The vision is at least $2 billion in economic impact. The vision is, I would get Stacy on here to confirm the number, maybe tens of thousands of students who are trained with the various credentials. So those are all things that you're going to see, and then you just walk that back. What does that look like in 5 years and 2 years? And of course, we're going to go as fast and as far as we can. I view a lot of those as the minimums, frankly. But what you're going to see is movement in each of these spaces. You're going to see increased number of relocations and folks who are investing in this. You're going to see the broader diversity of stackable credentials that we talked about earlier. You're going to see that very near term. You're going to see more manufacturers evaluating the extent to which they can broaden what it is they produce and how they fit. Catherine made a great point about the gaps in supply chains to make various grid technologies. So you're going to see that capability come online, which is then going to enable us to have more production for grid technologies here. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I also like to, emphasize that, as John said, this is research and development, it's translation to commercialization, so lab to market, and also workforce. But SCRA is leading the translation as well. So one of the things that I think there's a new opportunity for, it is absolutely about the grid, but it's also about energy efficiency at existing industry locations. So our existing industry is interested in those new technologies and working with smaller tech companies to improve their efficiency, which reduces the power demand on the grid. And that's also a success story. So I anticipate that we will definitely see a lot of new innovation from the region with our startups. Again, it's if you attract them, right, because you've got this hub with assets and resources and people interested in the topic. Instead of you trying to push it, we're pulling it.
I love that.
I really see that there'll be new opportunities for a lot of startups in the region that is targeted on a particular type of, not necessarily all grid, but a type of technology sets. We, by the way, are also looking for a technology director for the engine, which I'm going to post shortly. So if anybody has any suggestions or ideas, this is a hybrid kind of skill set. I'm looking for the unicorn, right, to make this happen, but we're really excited about it. And the other thing I think we need to emphasize is we're looking also for bringing new investment here, right? All of the, of course, companies and startups, but we need investors in this space. Traditionally, it's been a little bit of a rough road because it's a long-term horizon and it's a high capital investment. So as part of our job, working with companies to be more capital efficient and also targeting what their solution is, we really think we can draw investors here.
That's exciting. So I'll leave you all with one final question here. What's one thing you think listeners should remember about the engine, and how can interested organizations and individuals get involved?
Yeah, so thank you, Mitch, for that question. And really, we want folks to realize that if you think about certain parts of the country, I'll go back to where we started. You think about what makes Silicon Valley a hotbed for innovation and venture capital. It turns out that is a recipe that you can follow. And it turns out that we have exactly the ingredients needed for that recipe for the grid. So for never before has there ever been such a demand for power and for a grid that's modernized. So this region is the ideal region to be in, and you won't find a better place to relocate, to start a business, to invest, to get training, to move to. This is the place, and it's not just me saying it. We've been vetted and evaluated by the National Science Foundation and industry partners. So the federal government has vetted this, industry has vetted this, and it's clear this is where you need to be if you care about those things. And so, and you can get involved by email us, call us, text Catherine. But you can
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we have intake forms. We want to hear from you. Happy to share this information. That's what this engine is intended to do. Why do you need an engine? We already have these fantastic assets. You could have asked, well, gosh, why do you need an engine if we already have all these ingredients? Because we need these ingredients to work together. The cake won't bake itself, not in the timeline we need it to. So this engine, our partnership, UNC Charlotte, SCRA, and others, you need that partnership to accelerate that movement so that we can see the improvements in the quality of life that we all want.
That's great, Catherine.
Yeah, just another anecdote on that. When we were specifically asked, NSF asked our industry partners, well, this is great. If you're already committed, why do you need this? And as John said, this is a catalyst. And they're like, oh, absolutely, we'll continue down our strategic paths, but we're not going to collaborate in this way unless there's a catalyst to do it. So what I think folks should remember is that this is a huge opportunity for our region. And we are definitely open to engaging all folks in it. There might be new opportunities, not just in engineering and software and hardware development, but in marketing and in finance and in advertising and in teaching. New ways to do things. I mean, I think as we develop the new opportunities, we'll, again, not just the gaps, but we'll see how a new technology could help in another area. Like that's part of this, right, is making connections. The digital twin thing we mentioned, what is a digital twin? It's a representation of a system that's already there. I think when people get immersed in something like that, they will see new opportunities that they haven't really even thought of. And so we will. We will learn that. So for us, of course, because SCRA, again, works with academia, with industry, and with entrepreneurs, what we want you to do is reach out to us, tell us what your interests are, tell us where you like to connect with folks, if it's economic development, if it's new customers, if it's new educational opportunities, and we'll plug you in. That is our role, to plug you in to the relevant partner where you might get traction.
That's great. John, Catherine, this whole conversation's been amazing. I'm really excited about the future and what this really means, not just for the Charlotte region, but really across the Carolinas as a whole. And from an economic development standpoint, I'm really anxious and excited to get to work with you both. So thank you for your time and really just elaborating a little bit more about, what this means, not just here, but really across the Carolinas, and appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, Mitch. I think this is a great opportunity to get the word out and let everybody know about our two-state initiative and partnership.